Off-road one-wheel riding is the pinnacle of all one-wheeling. It is the mecca, it is the most exhilarating sport, wind in the hair, blasting through trees and smiles, dirt mustaches, all of it. It is the best. So the first thing we're going to talk about is body and foot positioning. Body and foot positioning are universal to all board sports, and they're going to help you improve the most. I mean, it is by far the most important thing we can work on as riders. So behind me I have footage of Christian and Mateo from a shred series in Snow Basin, Utah. This is awesome single track that we just lapped, kept going. And they're really good riders. So we have a lot of examples of good body positioning, and we have a few examples of bad body positioning that we're gonna break down. So let me scrub through this and we'll dissect it as we go.
Right here.
So right off the bat, the first thing I noticed about this is they have their hips over the tire with their body weight back on the back foot. When you're riding on the street or on a flat road, or you're even a beginning rider, you're steering a lot with your shoulders. So compensating that forward pressure on the front foot with the weight in the chest backwards is gonna be super helpful and crucial to keep you from going over the front. You see that very often they have their hands up in the air doing some sort of tightrope walk, and this is to keep themselves balanced and over the center of the board. So that's really important, and the more you can work and practice that, the more comfortable you're gonna be on trail. When you're approaching this berm, as soon as they do it, their weight's off, hands are going up to counterbalance that. Going over a steep rocky section, hands are up, weight is back. That is by far the most important thing to trail riding. If you take anything away from this video, it's this. Keep your weight back, your hips over the board, and your hands up to balance. Moving on to foot positioning, also very important, arguably just as important as body positioning. A few things we can do is make sure our stance is correct. And this honestly comes down to whatever feels right for you. Whatever feels good is correct. Typically, I try to stand shoulder width apart, and I imagine myself, if I'm going to jump as high as I could, how would my feet be? And then I transfer that to the board. Super simple. You can mess around with that at your leisure, figure out what feels comfortable. Behind me, I have some riding footage from Palm Desert. We were out on some BLM land, and we had a great time. Sunset, twilight hour, beautiful. Something that is very important in trail riding is to relax your ankles. This may sound counterintuitive, but the board is going to naturally want to roll and rock underneath your feet. And it's your job to manage these micro adjustments and just react to them instead of trying to muscle the board into the direction you want to go. This is one of those things that's really hard to explain, but when you do it, you're going to feel a difference, and you're going to feel more confident and ride out of more treacherous terrain more often. The way you can practice this is in your driveway, in your living room, in your garage. Start doing big circles on your heel side and your toe side, and slowly try to make those circles tighter and tighter until you can basically turn on a dime. And then once you have that mobility of the ankle, you'll be able to react and respond to these trail conditions much easier. Another thing is I am always gripping with my toes, but I'm allowing my heels to bounce and absorb some of that chatter from the board. So my toes are tight, my heels are bouncing, my ankles are loose to allow for micro adjustments of the board. Tip number 2 is talking about trail awareness, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's basically the dirt, sand, gravel, asphalt, whatever your board is riding over, and how to approach that safely and with respect to how the board operates. For example, I know that if I'm riding on asphalt or hard pack, I'm going to have much more control than if I ride on gravel or sand. And that's just the nature of all things tire. When you're riding over uneven terrain, such as rocks sticking out of a dirt trail, you need to de-weight the board. So de-weighting the board comes from honestly for me, it's the heels, where I kind of pop up and let myself go weightless for a second. And this is gonna help the board ride over these things, almost like doing a mini bonk. Every time you ride over something, you're going to pop the board a little bit by de-weighting it. When you de-weight the board, you're not gonna have such a big reaction when it hits the rock because the board is doing less work, holding less weight. Moving on to tip number 3, which is board setting and gear. I find that riding off-road, I tend to lower my PSI a bit, so I have a little bit more cushion in that tire, and I'm going to roll over uneven terrain easier. Mess around in the custom shaping setting or in different riding modes if you're on Pint, and find out what feels best for you. This is something that I can't tell you you're gonna like. It's something that you should just mess around with. Talking about safety gear, I know that we always always ride with helmets on at the bare minimum. And especially if you're going to be getting into trail riding and riding off-road and more, sketchy situations, you should always be wearing a helmet at the very least. But I also recommend wrist guards and knee pads. And honestly, any gear that's going to make you feel safer and more confident riding. Because the last thing you want is to feel like uncomfortable while you're putting yourself in a learning environment. So safety gear up. We have a bunch of helmets at sale on our website, and there's a ton of resources to buy other gear. So check that out. The next tip I want to talk about is knowing when to bail. As the resident one-wheel filmer, I'm usually riding with a gimbal and a camera rig. So something that's worked for me is I always bail early and I always bail often. I live by those words. You don't want to get in a situation when you aren't able to run out of a fall. Getting comfortable dismounting the board with both feet. When I was learning how to ride, I practiced jumping off, going fast, jumping off, going slow, going backwards, jumping, twisting. All of these things help me out a lot so that I don't even have to think about it when the situation arises. I can just ditch the board and I know I'm gonna be okay. There's a lot of resources online to learn how to fall, learn how to roll. I'd suggest looking into that. So the last thing I want to talk about and the final tip is practice these at home. These are all obtainable skills that you can sharpen and improve on. And it really just comes from riding and working at it. So what I'd say would be the most important things to work on: tight circles on your heel and toe side. And if you've mastered tight turns on both your heel and your toe, start doing figure eights. Learn the balance and tipping points of your board and the recovery from switching your weight forward to back. So what I do for this is you have a balance board or what are those things called? I think it's just a balance board. If you don't have that, power off your one wheel and just try to see how long you can balance and stand on it. If you need to cheat with the wall at first, that's totally fine. Getting yourself more comfortable switching your weight from forward to back is gonna help you recover and save from those little micro adjustments. Just go ride. The biggest and best way to get better is by doing it. And that was some off-road riding techniques. I hope that was helpful and applicable, and you can take some of the information from this video and bring it out onto the trail with you. If you guys